She didn't raise her voice. That would have made sense, maybe even given me something to push back against. Instead, she let the corners of her mouth bend into that faint, almost polite curve, a smile I'd seen her use at gallery openings when she wanted to acknowledge someone without actually engaging. Her voice was low, almost warm, as she said, "Maybe you should get some air." It landed with surgical precision, a tone sharp enough to separate me from the moment. What caught me wasn't the words themselves. It was the way her eyes drifted past me, scanning the wall behind my shoulder as though I'd already stepped out of frame. The kind of look you give a painting you've decided doesn't belong on your wall anymore. I remember my fingers tightening around the brass compass in my pocket, the one she'd given me on our second anniversary. Back then it had been wrapped in a small velvet pouch, presented with the sort of sentimental speech you expect from someone who believes in forever. She said it would guide us through anything. Now, feeling the ridges of its case pressing into my palm, it didn't feel like a guide. It felt like a silent map out. I kept my voice steady, asking her what that was supposed to mean. She just shrugged, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, her attention sliding toward the kitchen counter where her phone sat face down. That's when I noticed the faint vibration, a short buzz, quick enough to pretend you didn't hear it if you wanted to. The air between us had a weight I hadn't felt before, not in all the arguments or silences we'd had. It wasn't about anger. It was about something already decided. She leaned a hand on the counter, drumming her fingers in a slow, absent rhythm, like she was waiting for someone else's cue. I stepped back, trying to read her expression. There wasn't one. Just that mild, almost distracted look, as if I'd interrupted her during a task she couldn't name aloud. My thumb traced the edge of the compass in my pocket, a habit from long drives when I used to check the needle, even though I knew it was purely decorative. She reached for a glass of water without looking at me, sipped, then set it down with deliberate care. The glass made a soft click on the counter, too precise to be careless, too casual to be staged. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't turn it over. Something inside me shifted then. Not a collapse, not even a spike of anger. Just a realization that I was standing in the doorway of something I hadn't yet named, and she was already halfway through it. I told her I'd be back later, though we both knew I wasn't going anywhere right then. Her response was a slow nod, eyes still fixed somewhere past my shoulder. And in that moment I knew, whatever air she thought I needed, it wasn't meant to bring me back. The shift didn't come like a storm. It was more like the slow dimming of a room, each day a little darker, until one morning you realize you've been sitting in near darkness for weeks. Meals across the same table became silent transactions. Pass the salt, refill the glass, scrape the plate. She still looked up sometimes, but the glances didn't land. They skimmed past me the way her eyes had that day in the kitchen. When I asked about her day, the answers shrank. Fine. Busy. I'm tired. Each delivered in the same flat tone, as if the details were an indulgence she couldn't afford to give. I tried to fill the space with my own updates, but those floated in the air and settled like dust, untouched, unacknowledged. The brass compass turned up in the laundry that week. I found it in the bottom of the basket, polished so clean it looked new. I hadn't touched it in months. I didn't ask her about it. I wasn't ready to give her the satisfaction of knowing I'd noticed. Instead, I slipped it into my desk drawer at work, telling myself it was just a trinket. But every time my hand brushed against it, I felt that same cold press of metal in my palm from the day she told me to get some air. Around the same time, I started catching small irregularities in our joint account. Round number withdrawals, 50 here, 100 there. Always under thresholds that might trigger an alert. Always spaced just enough apart to seem random. I told myself they could be groceries, gas, little things I'd forgotten she'd bought. But something about the numbers bothered me. They were too neat, too deliberate. One night she came home later than usual. She tossed her bag onto the couch and headed straight for the bedroom without saying a word. I followed a minute later and saw her in the glow of the closet light, rifling through the top shelf of her side. When she noticed me, she froze for half a second before smoothing her hair and giving me a quick, unconvincing smile. "Looking for my scarf," she said, holding up one that was clearly folded and ready to grab. She brushed past me toward the bathroom, the faint scent of some cologne I didn't recognize trailing behind her. The next morning the compass was back in the kitchen drawer, the one we never use except for menus and old keys. I left it there. For now. It happened at a friend's backyard, gathering borrowed chairs, a playlist that kept skipping. We arrived together. Within minutes she softened into the edges, present but not reachable. I stayed with the host, making small talk while my attention kept slanting toward her. Her phone lived in her hand like a second pulse. Face down when eyes were on her, face up the moment they were. The brass compass sat in my jacket pocket. I found it with my fingers the way a swimmer finds the pool wall, just to know where I was. I noticed the stare when the laughter around us swelled and she didn't react. She was focused past the string lights on a man unloading a cooler near the deck. No drama in it, just a locked line. He wiped his hands on a towel. She smoothed her hair without thinking, then angled her shoulders a few degrees as if giving herself a better lane of sight. I took 2 bottles of sparkling water as my pretext and joined her. "Need anything?" I asked. She accepted a bottle, thanked me, eyes not leaving that direction. "Pretty sure we've met through work," she said, the explanation too neatly. "Might say hi later." She didn't move. A server floated by with skewers. She laughed at a line I missed, set her skewer untouched on a plate, then adjusted again. Left shoulder forward, right foot pointed toward the steps. Each time he shifted, she mirrored by degrees. There were clean explanations. He could have been a client, a neighbor, a familiar face tickling memory. People are allowed to be curious. That's what I told myself while I tried a normal thread about the patio lights. She hummed politely, nothing sticking. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, thumb hovering just long enough to verify the sender, then set it upside down. "Battery's low," she said. I hadn't asked. During a toast, everyone faced the host. She stood 3/4 turned toward the deck, expression neutral but intent, the way you watch subtitles in a loud bar. My thumb found the compass lid. It clicked, a small sound swallowed by applause. When the toast ended, she moved only a step to a gap in the hedge. "You okay?" I asked when I reached her. "Fine," she said, smiling without teeth. "Do you have the car keys?" I left lip balm in the console. Practical, perfectly timed. By the time I returned, she was animated with a cluster from her department, the deck positioned over their shoulders. On the drive home, she leaned on the window and scrolled. "I think the host's cousin is starting a company," she said lightly, as if reporting weather. "That guy by the deck looked familiar." "From where?" I kept it even. She shrugged. "Some conference, maybe." The screen's reflection blinked across the glass. The compass pressed cold against my thigh. I didn't challenge it. First clues are always still explainable if you want them to be. I just noted the angles, the timing, the way she redirected me with the keys, and the small recalibrations of her body to hold an unobstructed view. Back at home, she set her phone face down on the counter and opened the fridge like the night was ordinary. I placed the compass by the fruit bowl. Its lid caught the light. She glanced, 1 beat, then 2, closed the fridge and asked if I wanted tea. I said I was good. I slid the compass back into my pocket before bed, not for luck, for measurement. Something in me had started counting, even if I refused to name it yet. It was supposed to be routine. I'd been tracking a delivery that kept bouncing between warehouses, and when the app showed it had finally arrived, I pulled up the home security feed to see if the driver had actually left it. The footage loaded slowly, little squares of still frames building into motion. First the package, then her. She came into frame from the living room, phone in hand, hair pulled into the kind of loose knot she only wore at home. She unlocked the door, not the quick twist you give to a stranger delivering something, but a slow turn like she was opening it for someone she knew. A man stepped inside. Tall, slim, carrying a flat, unmarked envelope under his arm. He didn't glance around, didn't hesitate on the mat. His shoes stayed on. She closed the door gently behind him. No sound on the clip, just their mouths moving in low conversation. Her posture wasn't tense. She leaned into the doorway, one arm resting on the frame. At one point, her hand brushed his sleeve. He handed her the envelope. She tucked it under her arm without looking inside, like she already knew what was in it. They didn't move deeper into the house. Whatever they were exchanging was meant to be quick, contained to that foyer space just beyond the camera's reach. After a few minutes, he stepped back out. She locked the door, slid the envelope under a stack of mail, and walked toward the kitchen. That night, I found the brass compass sitting beside her keys on the counter. It hadn't been there in weeks. The lid was open, the needle quivering slightly in the air conditioning draft. It felt deliberate, like she'd placed it where I'd see it. Over dinner, she was unusually talkative. Asked about my day, even told a story about a client who'd brought their dog into a meeting. But every now and then, her eyes flicked to the counter, to that open compass, as if checking whether I'd moved it. I thought about the envelope, how she hadn't opened it. About the man's ease, the absence of surprise in his face. About the way she'd stepped into the doorway to block any clear view from the camera. I didn't ask. Questions would only give her a chance to stage an answer. Instead, I cleared the dishes, left the compass exactly where she'd put it, and told her I'd be working late in the study. In reality, I spent most of the night replaying the footage frame by frame, watching the way she'd angled herself, the light shift across her face when she smiled at him. Small, private, not the smile she used for me anymore. By midnight, I'd stopped trying to fit it into an innocent box. This was no forgotten friend or casual drop-off. It was something planned, something practiced. I closed the footage, shut down the monitor, and slid the compass into my pocket before bed. Its weight was steady, grounding. And for the first time, I began to think about direction in terms of escape, not repair. Budget talk shifted from forecasts to triage. 2 projects froze, then a third. Numbers that belonged on Fridays started landing midweek. Tiny reversals popped up near midnight. Not proof, just a rhythm I could feel in my hands when I typed. I cross-checked our ledger against my calendar, then against the joint account she and I shared. The dates aligned too neatly, her round number withdrawals, our late-night reversals. Coincidence is a story accountants tell to sleep. I didn't. Compliance pinged me. Could I confirm adding a minor vendor, Harbor Line Advisory? Their W-9 listed our office address down to the suite. I hadn't submitted it. File history showed creation from a shared workstation on my floor at 9:43 p.m. A time I was home, watching her stir tea with that faraway look, like she was listening to a song only she could hear. I clipped the brass compass to my briefcase and walked into my manager's office. He rolled a pen cap, eyes rimmed red. "Sanity check," he said. "Any reason your name would be on Harbor Line?" I kept my tone flat. "No, address matches ours, contact isn't me." He held the silence, then asked for logs and an after-hours access review for controls. Controls means cover. IT's summary arrived after 2. A generic team account had touched vendor files after hours. A routing field, a checkbox, a tiny approval. The kind of paperwork that slips through because it looks exactly like paperwork. I printed the report and set the compass on it long enough to stop my hands from moving. At lunch, I sat in my car and watched the needle twitch with the AC. In my head, the foyer clip, the man with the envelope, her angle blocking the camera. If Harbor Line was nothing, the timing was cruel. If it was something, my badge stood too close to the spark. She was light that evening, almost buoyant. Asked about a new place downtown, set a glass of sparkling water in front of me, then straightened the mail tray. Her fingers found the same flat, unmarked envelope and tucked it deeper as if depth could turn it into a receipt. "How was work?" she asked, voice making it small. "Foggy," I said. She nodded quickly and moved on to a coworker's baby shower. Under the table, the compass warmed in my palm. Before bed, I checked the joint account again. Another neat withdrawal, timed within minutes of a reversal, posted to my project's holding account. I didn't screenshot it. I wrote both times on a sticky note and pressed the compass over it in my desk drawer, as if metal could pin uncertainty until morning. Risk stopped being abstract. If Harbor Line touched my cue, I'd be explaining coincidence to people whose job is to doubt coincidence. If layoffs followed whatever variance exposure meant, the box under my desk might finally have a purpose. I heard myself trimming sentences at work, removing pronouns, offering only verbs. Line by line, I became a man no one could quote. Morning. I ironed the good shirt, the one for rooms where language is weighed. She hovered with a mug, eyes testing my face. The compass clicked as I fastened it to the briefcase. Her gaze dropped, flicked away. "Big day?" she asked, casual. "Direction day," I said. "Less drift." She placed her mug down with a neat, careful tap, like a metronome keeping time for a song neither of us planned to finish. The message came from a number I hadn't saved, a small bubble at the top of my screen while I was waiting for an elevator that didn't want to decide. Hey, this is Mara from the old duplex. Random question. Do you two still come to the park by the train station? I stared at the name, trying to place it. Mara with the terrier that barked at skateboards. Right. I typed back a neutral sometimes. Why? The elevator doors opened, then closed on 3 people before I could move. Her reply was longer this time. I think I saw your wife there the last 2 Thursdays. Same bench by the mural. Didn't want to be weird, but tonight I walked past and heard the guy with her say, love. I figured it was you from behind until he stood up. Sorry if I'm off, ignore this if it's nothing. The word blinked on my screen like a warning light. Love. No embellishment, no scandalized add-ons. Just a detail from a person who noticed things and did the polite thing, flagged it, then apologized for noticing. The brass compass clipped to my key ring brushed my thigh when I shifted, its small weight like a tap on the shoulder. I asked the only question that mattered. Which mural? Old train map. The one with the peeling blue paint. She followed with a photo she'd taken weeks ago, her terrier mid-yawn, the mural behind them. I could see the bench at the edge, the same bench where we'd once eaten terrible deli sandwiches and made up names for the trains that never arrived on time. The day we got engaged, she'd handed me the compass there, sun in her hair, voice soft with the kind of future people promise when they still mean it. So we never lose each other, she'd said. My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles went bloodless. I thanked Mara, kept it brief. She sent one more message, softer this time. I thought it was you. Same jacket color, guess not, sorry again. I typed no worries and slid the phone into my pocket. The compass knocked against it, a tiny metallic sound in the quiet of the lobby. The elevator finally arrived. Inside, a man in a suit looked at my reflection and then at the floor numbers like he was afraid to be caught seeing anyone. Traffic crawled that evening. I drove the long route home on purpose past the station. From the road I could see the edge of the park, the iron fence, the mural fading toward the tracks, the bench facing the clock that never kept the right hour. The place used to feel like an anchor. Now it looked like a set piece. I didn't stop. Stopping would have turned it into an event, and I'd learned what events cost. Room for denial, room for performance. Instead, I parked 2 blocks from the apartment and sat with the car off, listening to the tick of cooling metal. I scrolled back through Mara's messages, tracking how careful she'd been, how little she added. That's the thing about outsiders. They don't need the story to bend. They just report the detail they accidentally walked through. Inside, she was at the counter, slicing a lemon with the small, precise movements she reserved for knives and email. "You're late," she said without looking up. The blade pressed through the rind with a tiny squeak. I turned the compass in my pocket so the lid faced outward. The hinge clicked softly under my thumb. "Detour," I said. I reached for a glass, poured water, watched the slice sink. She slid the cutting board away and wiped the counter like the day needed polishing. I asked how her evening had been, casual, as if I hadn't spent 10 minutes staring at the park's dark outline. "Fine," she said, the practiced word that had worn a groove in the room. "You." "Quiet," I said. The compass tapped the glass when I set it down, a small chime. Her eyes flicked to my keys, then to the window, then back to me. She swallowed and reached for a towel, hands still. At my desk later, I laid Mara's name on a sticky note and drew a thin line to the words Thursdays, mural bench train map. On the next line, I wrote 2 times from finance, both stamped on Thursdays, both near closing. I wasn't building a case, I was building a map. The difference matters. Cases make you argue. Maps tell you where you already are. I closed the notebook and sat with the compass in my palm until the ridges warmed. The park used to be the answer we gave each other when the city felt too loud. "Meet me by the map." We'd say it like a promise. Turns out we did meet by the map. I just wasn't the one waiting on the bench. She picked a tote from the closet like she was choosing a mood. "Late yoga," she said, looping a hair tie onto her wrist. The words were casual, the kind worn down by overuse. She checked the time, then my face. I gave her a nod and set my empty glass in the sink. "Don't wait up," she added, one hand on the doorframe. Her keys chimed against the tote's zipper. "I won't," I said. The brass compass lay on the counter where I'd left it after work, lid open, needle holding its thin slice of north. I closed it with my thumb and pocketed it. The click felt like a gate falling shut. The door sealed behind her with a practiced hush. I waited a beat for the building to settle, then moved. No speeches, no proof arranged like trophies. I pulled the travel bag with essentials from under the bed, plain canvas, easy to mistake for gym gear, and set it on the chair. 2 shirts folded tight, passport, birth certificate, laptop, charger. The slim binder of work documents I'd rather carry than explain later. I took only what I'd miss if someone else claimed the drawers tomorrow. The framed photo stayed. So did the mugs we never agreed on. The blanket, she said, scratched her skin. I dried my glass, turned it upside down on the rack, and snapped off the kitchen light. In the bedroom, her perfume bottle sat with its cap crooked, a small tilt that always felt like a test. I straightened it, gesture without message. My side of the closet breathed back at me, hangers lighter than my mind. I slipped the compass chain through a belt loop so it wouldn't clatter when I walked. Small things matter when you're trying not to leave echoes. In the study, I signed out of the shared desktop and wiped only my sessions, not hers. Every footprint I erased was mine alone. I slid the sticky note from last night, Mara mural bench Thursdays, into the binder and closed it. The apartment listened as I moved. Thermostat beep. Zipper teeth, paper into canvas. I left the mail stacked as it was, envelope edges aligned under the tray's lip. The flat, unmarked one remained where she'd tucked it. Not my mystery anymore. At the door I looked back. Couch, lamp, table, the plant that tolerated our neglect. Nothing asked me to stay. I locked the deadbolt with the same deliberate turn I'd watched her use on the footage. Keys in left hand, bag strap over right shoulder. I walked without hurry. A good exit doesn't run, it simply ceases to belong. In the lobby I kept my head down. Outside, evening held noise. I set the bag in the trunk and held the edge a moment, letting metal cool me too. The compass pressed against my hip when I sat. I turned the lid and watched the needle settle. I didn't check my phone. No timer would mark the minute I stopped being available to her explanations. I took the long way out, past the park's outline, the mural's ghost blue under sodium lights. The bench was empty. I didn't need witnesses or corrections or the kind of luck people text about later. At the first red light, I touched the compass the way you touch your pocket to confirm your wallet. Present accounted for. On green I went. If she came back and found only the shape of my absence, that would be the conversation. Absence doesn't ask permission, doesn't hold a vote, doesn't wait. I left no note. Words had done enough shifting in that apartment. Silence would carry what needed carrying. And North, impolite, kept pointing away from her. Weeks turn patient when you stop waiting. My new place learned my footsteps. The fridge hum didn't accuse anyone. I set the brass compass on the desk beside a chipped coaster and let the needle settle whenever the fan clicked on. North kept choosing the window. I didn't argue. News about her arrived the way weather does from people who look up often. A mutual texted after a coworker's fundraiser. She'd shown up alone, stayed near the door, smiled too wide at questions about us, then left before the last speech. Another said she'd RSVP'd to a small dinner, sat between 2 empty chairs, and pretended to check messages whenever conversations braided without her. The laugh I used to know had a new timbre in their stories, thin at the edges, built for show. The man from the foyer footage evaporated from our periphery. Someone who knew someone said he'd step back to focus on work. That phrase covers many exits. I didn't mark the day. I only noticed that her photos grew solitary, cropped plates, flowers in jars, a horizon. Captions that reached for uplift drew fewer replies. The friends who once mirrored her tone started sending me neutral check-ins, careful not to volunteer her narratives or ask for mine. Absence spreads when you stop feeding it. At the office, the Harbor Line puzzle resolved in a drafty conference room where risk prefers to meet. They had traced the vendor touch to a guest login and a recycled template. "Thanks for flagging the threads you noticed," my manager said, fingers on a legal pad like he needed to feel paper again. Controls tightened. My name slid off the file like water. Afterward, I stood in the stairwell longer than the moment required just to hear my breath steady. She tried using intermediaries. A message through an old neighbor. She just wants to exchange a few items. Another via a cousin I barely knew. She thinks you took a photo that matters to her. I kept replies tidy. Inventory listed, pickup window offered to the property office, no private handoffs. When the box was gone, the desk looked cleaner, the room lighter. The compass stayed. I ran past the park once early, the mural a washed-out map under gray light. The bench sat empty except for a bottle cap and a leaf plastered to wet wood. That spot used to be a shorthand for home. Now it was just a bench facing a clock that never kept time. I walked along the fence and watched the trains pretend to be on schedule. No dramatics, just motion. She popped up at places I'd never seen her before. The gym I joined years ago, the coffee shop where the barista draws uneven hearts. She always arrived alone, looked around like she'd misplaced a word, and left with a paper cup she didn't finish. People who once felt claimed by her closeness gave her space now, not out of cruelty, but because constant spectacle is tiring when the script doesn't change. Isolation isn't a cliff. It's a hallway of closed doors you keep expecting to open. My parents asked once if I'd consider a conversation for closure. I told them closure isn't a conversation. It's a choice you live through. They didn't push. Family learns your new boundaries faster than friends do. On a Sunday, I cleaned the apartment top to bottom with the kind of care I used to reserve for holidays. In the quiet afterward, I opened the desk drawer and found the velvet pouch the compass came in, creases softened with time. I slid the compass inside for the first time in years, not to hide it, but to give it a place to rest. It had done its job, not guiding us, but telling me when the room stopped pointing to anything real. A final update arrived weeks later from someone who never gossips. She'd hosted a small thing at her place and half the invites canceled late. The group chat moved without her that night, currents shifting while she refreshed a room that stayed the same. I pictured her rearranging chairs, angling a lamp, practicing brightness in the reflection of a dark window. Not unkindly, just accurately. I didn't answer the message. I closed the drawer. The needle would be fine in the dark. North is stubborn, it doesn't need an audience. And me? I kept walking the direction I'd already chosen. She told me to get some air. I stepped outside and let the door lock. I haven't checked if it opens from the other side.